Hey guys, Taki here. This is going to be a quick video on the ROG Ally. I haven't made any content on this handheld until now, but I do have some info that I want to share about this device and some of my initial impressions. I attended an ROG media event last week and they shared a lot of details about the device, and a few of them are probably going to make this device a game changer in terms of what it will bring to the market. As I'm sure all of you know, the ROG Ally is being billed as a top-of-the-line AMD handheld with a performance profile that is supposed to eclipse the Steam Deck. Let's start by talking about the specs. Asus came out and stated that there will be at least two versions of the Ally, with the only difference being what I hope is a swap in the processor. The lower-end Ally comes with a Ryzen Z1 processor, which has a Zen 4 CPU and an RDNA 3 GPU built on a 4nm process. They claim that this is a custom chip from AMD, but we'll talk more about that at the end of the video. The slide that you're looking at now came from the press material after the event, but I could have sworn that they also had a slide for the top-end SKU with the Z1 Extreme processor. That also uses a Zen 4 CPU and an RDNA 3 GPU, but it's an 8-core CPU versus the 6-core in the Z1. I think either of these has the potential to be a decent upgrade over what the Steam Deck can offer at the higher end, but we need more data. Outside of the processor, they also said that this will come with 16GB of LPDDR5 RAM in dual channel, no word on a potential higher spec SKU, and 512GB of PCIe Gen 4 storage. On the hardware front, these are decent specs for a handheld in 2023, but there are some other aspects of this device that I think are more important. Since I haven't commented on the design, let's start there. Asus took a decent amount of time during the media event to talk about how they wanted to build this device. They said that their main challenge over all of their prototypes was to get a natural area for your hands to access all of the important controls. This slide here shows a ton of prototypes. We saw something similar to this with the launch of the deck, where they had a ton of prototypes, but I love seeing stuff like this. Most of the products that I cover on this channel would never be able to afford to go through this many different revisions. Even outside the cost of paying for engineers to do this many revisions, this requires way more time than most companies can dedicate to a single product. Asus claims that the final design that they went with has a ton of benefits, like optimal placement for the D-pad and joysticks, ergonomic buttons with textured print that you can grip with your fingers, an ergonomic angled edge that is supposed to fit into the palm of your hand nicely, and back buttons that are easy to reach. I haven't held this device in my hand, so I don't know how ergonomic it actually is, but if the deck was any lesson, it's not easy to judge stuff like this when you have a bigger handheld. I didn't know the deck would feel good in my hands until I printed one out, and I was surprised. I don't know if Asus will do the same thing for this, but I hope that they do because it opened up a huge ecosystem of products for the deck shortly after the product came to market. One thing that they seemed to stress was the overall weight of the device at 608 grams. This is kind of impressive because it's slightly lighter than the deck, which is kind of a benchmark at this point. Weight in a handheld is always a trade-off, and you usually need to trade battery life or cooling to make a handheld lighter. One of the things that looks interesting to me is their front panel. It's hard to tell if this back panel is plastic or they just injected it with metal and then painted it white. There are pros and cons to both, but I thought it was interesting that they purposely cut out a portion where the processor is so the APU doesn't make contact with the front panel. This is not common, and I wonder if this simple change would benefit any other handheld. Moving on, we need to talk about the screen. Based on the stats they gave, this is a decent upgrade in some areas over the deck. This is a 16:9 panel this time around, which is a more universal aspect ratio for games if we're being honest. There are a ton of games that I like to play on my deck that run with black borders, and it's kind of annoying. The color accuracy is a big one for me personally because they are claiming that this panel has 100% coverage of the sRGB color space. That is a high amount, even though there are other electronic devices that go well over this. The Steam Deck is rocking a solid 70-ish% of the sRGB color space, and it's obvious when you look at a good panel versus the one in the deck. We can compensate for this with saturation, but doing so comes at the cost of our contrast ratio, which already isn't that great on the deck. This one at 1001 is decent. It's not the best, but it should be an awesome upgrade over the deck and a lot of other handhelds on the market given the fact that our colors are so accurate. But the fact that this display is a FreeSync compatible panel is the main reason why I would buy this device regardless of anything else. When videos started coming out about this having a 120Hz screen, this thing got all kinds of hate because people claimed that it would be almost useless on this, or that you need to run this at an insane TDP in order to hit 120 FPS in retro games. I knew that there must have been something else here because a 120Hz panel that can't do G-Sync or FreeSync makes no sense. We are not at the point where you can use a standard panel at that high of a refresh rate, but FreeSync changes the entire game. I think a lot of people watching this have experience with G-Sync or FreeSync, but boiled down, This just means that the panel can sync to the content that you're playing. This eliminates or lowers input lag, combats screen tearing, and can have some power saving properties. In essence, this is a variable refresh rate panel, and it's something that a lot of people in this handheld niche have wanted for years, and Asus is the first company that's coming out the gate with it in a handheld. We don't need to do any nonsense of going into CRU to try and add custom refresh rates for our screens. This is just set it and forget it. If I play a low-end game that has uncapped FPS, and it can hit 120 FPS, the panel will adjust. If I play a demanding AAA game that can only do 30 or 40 FPS, the panel will adjust. That is nuts. When you take all of that with the fact that this screen also has a peak brightness of 500 nits, this is a beast of a panel that they found. I'm sure others will follow because there are not a lot of panels like this on the market, and this one is available. Continuing on, I like that this device has front-firing speakers, and Asus has good laptops with great sounding speakers, so I hope that the marketing material carries over into a device that is going to knock it out of the park. We don't have that many handhelds that have this kind of speaker arrangement, but this is my preferred setup. The next point that I want to talk about is cooling. The marketing material claims that their heat pipes work regardless of the orientation of the device. I don't know if what they did is non-standard compared to other companies that are also using vapor heat pipes in their products, but I do know that vapor chambers are not common in PC handhelds. I know of a few companies that have tried this and they couldn't get decent results, so I'm interested to see this in action. You'll also notice that we have two fans, and I've heard all kinds of things about this, some of which are hot takes. There are a few things that you need to know when it comes to fans. The first is that there are all kinds of fans on the market that have different cooling efficiencies and use different amounts of power. Just because you have two fans does not mean that this device is wasting power versus just having a single fan. It could very well be true that these two fans with the dual heat pipe design use less power than a single fan, which would have to run faster to cool the same TDP. Even if this wasn't the case, you're talking about minuscule amounts of power in the grand scheme of things. All that being said, the skeptic in me sees this design and sees other handhelds that I've reviewed that also use dual fans that don't perform better than some of the better companies in this market that use a single one. I think the main difference in that situation is the fact that Asus is an enormous company with people that are way more talented than your average engineer that is working on products that I review. If this design ends up working well, it will be because they have a better team of mechanical engineers and that they're able to afford more robust thermal testing. It's as simple as that. The thing that I'm looking forward to the most is that they're coming out and claiming that this thing generates very low noise, and I know that this is a sticking point for a lot of Steam Deck owners. If this thing really is at 20 dB under a load of, let's say, 10 watts, that's awesome, because that means that I can play a ton of games at night without having to worry about waking up anyone near me. I hope that the 500 nit screen can dim down enough to complete the package. Asus talked about their Armory Crate app that they're bringing to this handheld, and I think this has the ability to shake up other players in this market that aren't focused on stuff like this. Valve is currently the king in software and PC handhelds, but it looks like Asus is gunning for a solid second place with a decent lead over others. When I look at this, I see a more refined version of ISpace, so I hope this works out well with all of the planned features that they have. So let's wrap this up with the processor, the custom nature of it, and what I think this can offer. First, let's talk about the custom processor. We have seen quote-unquote custom processors in this market before. On paper, there are Android handhelds that have custom processors, but when you dig deeper, they are not really different from a standard SKU. I don't know if that's the case here, and I also don't know if it matters. Let me give you two scenarios. In the first scenario, you are a Steam Deck owner and you want an upgrade. Well, either of these Ryzen 7000 processors is going to give you more performance than you can get out of the deck. Even Ryzen 6800U can do that at a higher TDP. If we just look at it like that, then this is a no-brainer. It probably means that Asus was able to get a ton of chips for a lower cost than companies in China can, but that's the nature of the game. Yeah, it kind of sucks if you work at those companies and you need to compete with this on price, but it's not that different from Valve having access to an awesome processor that is unmatched at low TDP, even by Ryzen 7000. On the other hand, if this is a custom chip, then it's a double win for consumers and it's a double L for competitors. I really want there to be a chip that outpaces the processor in the deck at every TDP level. From everything that I've seen at this point, that is not the case for Ryzen 7000, and it wasn't the case for Ryzen 6000. It doesn't seem reasonable to me that a processor that is 2 generations old should be able to have this benefit for that long. And if this is a custom chip, I hope that it's customized to give better performance at low TDP. That's what I want. But if this is the case, and this is a customized chip that is more efficient or gives more power to the GPU at low TDP, then other players in this market are screwed, because not everyone wants a handheld that only has 1 hour of battery life when it outperforms the deck. That does not feel like a great trade-off. As for the price of the Ally, they only claim that this will be less than $1,000, but they didn't say for which SKU. I would personally buy this thing for the screen alone, even if it has the exact same performance as normal Ryzen 7000 series processors that are about to launch from other big companies. But let me know your thoughts down below. Are you interested in the Ally, or are you waiting for something else? If you enjoyed this video, take a look at my recent video on the $20 gaming handheld that looks like a Super Nintendo controller. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.